Hi, this is Matt Cathall with Human Performance Personal Training and Athletics. The title of this presentation is Elite Athletic Performance Training. I wanted to give you a little background on KHFC, human performance, and myself. I personally started in the field with the Goskew method, which is a company now that's diverse and national. Many clinics throughout the country. They primarily focus on fitness rehab based stuff using postural and gait analysis. That's where I started as a client in the late 1980s as an athlete, and continued working with them as an assistant, training thousands of pro, college, high school athletes, as well as regular folks that had pain in athletic performance, rehab, strength training, flexibility work, etc. I essentially started my career there and took me from there. Ended up going into business with a gentleman that ran a Goskew's clinic on Jack Nicklaus's golf course in Florida. He started a company called Dynamics of Physical Development after he broke up with Goskew. Him and I opened up multiple offices, 11 chiropractor offices in San Diego, where we did therapeutic exercise, etc., and did national education programs in Dynamics of Physical Development's programs, which was mainly postural gait analysis, and also in therapeutic exercise. Not a lot of fitness stuff on that side with that company. And then, of course, during that time in the early 90s, went on to work as a Division I strength and conditioning coach for 2 years before moving on, opening my own business where I was doing a lot of professional strength coaching for a whole range of athletes for many years in the 90s while in San Diego. One of my contracts while in San Diego was also with the Navy SEALs, while working with Dynamics of Physical Development and helping reshape, refit all of their exercise programs because they were having too many injuries. Guy that I personally worked with as a client had got me into the program there and started working with a lot of the SEALs. His name was Ken Good. He was the director of Close Arms Combat for the Navy SEALs while I lived in San Diego, and he's off doing counterterrorism training and such nationally and government training programs in anti-terrorism. That was my entrance into the SEALs. Also worked for Metrex. I was sponsored by them as a personal trainer for 4 or 5 years, and then also consulted on the world's best personal training program, and also helped consult on their exercise and nutrition programs for many years with some of the top athletic performance trainers in the country, including Paul Chek and many others that are famous in the industry now. The company also has an athletic training and fitness facility in Napa, 6 trainers, 3,000 square feet, athletic training, personal training, rehab. We do it all, and all over the Bay Area. Home training, corporate training, all over the place. The company's been running corporate fitness and ergonomics programs since the late 80s when I first started doing consulting with Sony. To this date, we've trained over 10,000 folks in seminars, companies in fitness and injury prevention, mainly on the injury prevention side, because companies have a lot of lost dollars and injuries and strains and sprains and joint degeneration, so my company has become quite an expert at that in the industry, and having recently just taken over doing a project at a distribution center in Red Bluff for Walmart, my most recent client. A partial list of clients includes Genentech, De La Salle Institute, St. Mary's College, MUM Napa, Duckhorn, GoldenEye, Paradox, Silver Oak, City of Napa, City of Vacaville, City of Fairfield, Farniente, and many other companies that we've done injury prevention training and fitness programs for. Also been continuing education programs for many years, really since the late 80s, primarily involved with American Council on Exercise and the following organizations: National Athletic Trainers Association, State Boards of Health, Physical Therapy, Occupational Therapy in many states. So basically how it works with these companies is you apply your training program, try to become an educator, then it goes through either a state board of educators or fitness professionals in American Council and NADA's state, and what they do is they approve your program if they think their therapists or their healthcare professionals need it, and use it for continuing education programs. So I've been doing that since the late 80s, not only for Dynamics of Physical Development, but for my own company, and have conducted thousands of hours of trainings in continuing education programs in biomechanical analysis and therapeutic exercise, which is the basis for creating any rehab or elite exercise program or general personal training program. One of the things I really wanted to focus on in this presentation was to look at the differences between current protocols and exercise arena in physical therapy, occupational therapy, fitness, athletic performance training, and kind of compare it to where it should be and what I've been teaching for many years, really since the late 80s, to PTs, to OTs, to athletic trainers, to coaches, personal trainers, and of course my own clients, whether it be company or personal training clients. So kind of starting I would say in the exercise world, physical therapists as well as athletic trainers, which I don't put here, they're mentioned later, are kind of the cream of the crop as far as superficially saying their training, their college background and what they've studied, which in my book counts for something but really doesn't count for a lot, as you'll see later. But it's nice that they've gotten that training. But in general, I've trained nationally at some of the top hospitals, University of Alabama's hospital, DCH Hospital, Tuscaloosa, some of the top athletic performance and rehab hospitals in the country, and have a lot of experience in dealing one-on-one with these physical therapy directors in these departments. And I know what the top hospitals, the top trainers, the top physical therapists, OT guys think and what they do, what their evaluation techniques are, what their protocols. I have tons of experience because I've trained a lot of them in how to do it in a more effective basis. So in a kind of a Reader's Digest 1-minute form, which it really isn't fair, this is really a couple 100-hour conversation, but put down to 1 minute. Basically the pros that I found in the physical therapy world are the modalities of massage are effective for treating and preventing injuries, but not the foundation for treatment of prevention of injuries, and putting together proper exercise programs for people to actually really get rid of whatever symptoms or injuries that they may have. Exercise treatment is moderately effective for surgical rehab, and really physical therapy is geared towards functional medicine, getting people in and out of a hospital, because only the insurance companies will pay for so much and get them out, which unfortunately goes back to what insurance companies effectively, in my experience, dictate a lot of what's actually taught at the college level. Therefore, a lot of it's acute medicine, it's quadrant analysis and quadrant treatment, specific acute treatment, which is unfortunate, ineffective to some extent, but misses a lot of areas, and that gets us to the cons. Evaluation techniques for degenerative injuries or repetitive movement injuries are weak. Typically, most therapists that I know of will do a minimal amount of evaluation, look at MRIs, look at doctor's notes, and more or less work off of a book. That's more of a metaphor for really just memorizing techniques for specific injuries, as opposed to engineering it or reverse engineering it, being able to evaluate each person from top to bottom, doing goniometry, range of motion testing, gait analysis, and then designing the program that best works for that person. That's a very superficial way of saying that. Educate and pay is based upon a system for really, as I said, treating these acute injuries, and that's unfortunately dictated what's happening. It's a futile method for identifying the root cause of degenerative injuries. Whether we're looking at pro athletes, regular guys, or no matter what, it's not the best way for treating rehab issues. Typically, their exercise prescription only addresses areas of injuries and does not account for the compensatory motions, adaptations, and root causes of an injury. This doesn't permanently repair injuries and may actually cause more problems. One example of this is a Walmart company that I spoke with. In fact, largest, most successful company in the world are doing exercise programs currently that are injuring their employees. They're not helping, they're hurting in the most part, and that's why their numbers are so bad and they have so many injuries. And this is common not only at the corporate level for the most successful, biggest company in the world, but also professional teams, college athletes, and so forth. You would think a company that's got that much money would be able to hire the best people many years ago to solve these problems, but yet they haven't. Current methods in corporate occupational health. I say corporate because this is more for an occupational medicine as opposed to people who have brain injuries. There's a lot, occupational therapists, PTs do a lot of different things. So we're focusing more on the soft tissue injuries that athletes might have and what they're actually trained in. Pros for OTs, evaluation techniques are moderately effective at identifying tasks that potentially cause strain, sprains, and joint degeneration. Most PTs, OTs can pick out, hey, listen, based upon this lifting model and lifting formula, the the load is too high here and this person's going to get injured. They know a lot of the basic ramifications of what lead to injuries and the loads and limits and repetitive motions that any tendon and ligament can take for the most part. So these are some of the pros. Prescription trainings, prevention exercises, equipment, training manuals, etc. For the company employees is moderately effective. So they're at least moving in a direction where they're trying to get employees stronger and trying to teach them how to lift boxes correctly or how to type correctly or how to do whatever it is they're trying to do. But it's still very limited because we're based in the system of acute medical care, and this is what colleges are teaching our therapists, and therefore very limited in techniques for treating these. And as you know, most medical professionals know that insurance companies only pay for certain treatments. They don't pay you to treat every part of the body. Therefore, that's affected the educational system as well. So there are a lot of limits there. And that shows in a lot of the training manuals and training seminars that I've seen for companies, ranging from Pixar, Disney, again to Walmart, to Genentech, a company I worked for 9 years, where I brought their injuries down from over 50 injuries down to 0. In less than 6 months. They had some pretty remarkable clinical studies and research programs that I did for the company before we get hired. And once we were, the rest is history. Some of the cons of occupational health medicine or occupational therapist are their moderately effective assessment. They only give us a moderately effective exercise prescription. So, you know, if your assessment is not super effective, you're only looking at one particular area, as like a systems analysis engineer might look at, you're not looking at the whole system. And if you're not doing that, it makes it difficult to create an effective exercise prescription. The evaluations typically misunderstand ideal alignment at every joint and only assess for maybe one particular area and not for the whole system biomechanically. This negatively affects the entire injury prevention program: equipment, prevention exercises, manuals, training, etc. Many of the exercise programs actually promote further strains, sprains, and joint degeneration, and foolproof from the top companies in the world on this, and I've turned those companies around. So our expertise here really is in bodily alignment on my side, and gait, full body assessment, postural analysis, and as a basis, or one of the bases for creating effective exercise programs at any level, because that's typically the biggest weakness that we notice across the line, from athletic trainers to coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists, occupational therapists, athletic trainers, and other folks that devote their lives to exercise prescription. Current methods in athletic performance, training, strength and conditioning for college and pro athletes. This is a very, very long debate and explanation on all this stuff. So this is very complicated and difficult to explain in such a short amount of time, because there's a mind-blowing amount of information that goes from all the way from DNA, having a clear understanding of networking and data and how DNA works and how our body works in sensory environments, and it takes it to a whole nother level of thermodynamics and energy that just can't be explained here. That really is the basis for a lot of the stuff in our techniques that are proprietary, but listing more of the superficial parts of our system here. So the pros and for these professionals typically are they're moderately effective programs that are founded on scientific method, which is a problem across the board. We need to use the scientific method, but one of the problems is it only tests one variable. So if you really look outside the box, most exercise professionals typically run their world based upon the clinical method or the scientific method, where they're really only trying to think about one variable at a time, as opposed to thinking about the entire structure and how to move it, how to align it, all at one time. That is difficult to do. It takes a lot of education and a great understanding of not only exercise physiology, biomechanics, but the whole study of kinesiology. These professionals typically have good results, not great results. You could say because a trainer trains the best NFL player in the world, that makes him a great trainer. Well, that's false. It's called being at the right place at the right time and having probably decent credentials and a system that is moderately effective. And if that person succeeds, then that person becomes famous, the trainer that is, or the conditioning coach. So people will tend to start following that conditioning coach's protocols because they've worked with someone famous and that person has done well. Well, unfortunately, that's not necessarily practical. That's just called being popular and following the leader. So I tend to lean more on science, and if someone's program works, as opposed to hearing what the results are, I want to see how the science behind the program and how it actually is applied. And this is where we run into problems. In most of the continuing education seminars that I do, the state requires that the medical professional takes a pre and post test. You want to find out where their education is before and after. And I can tell you from the top hospitals in the country, with the top therapist, director of physical therapy departments with a lot of PhDs behind their name, typically on a whole will fail a basic anatomy test. Not banging them, but it says a lot about how our medical professionals think about engineering bodies and how we work with bodies as opposed to relying upon just techniques, which I address this later on. But really, the results are good for these strength coaches and athletic performance coaches in the areas of ATP, CP, more the energy systems, anaerobic glycolysis, aerobic lipolysis exercises. This gets back to understanding the scientific method, because it's simple to put a person on the bike and train in it. 40% VO2 max for 2 hours, because we know what the result is. But is that a practical application in the real world of an athlete that has to do multiple things, say on a football field, compared to a cyclist? So relatively easy for someone to put on EKG and a VO2 max system and test them there. Just about any good physiologist that's gone through at least a bachelor's level program understands how to do that and how to prescribe that with at least moderately good results. Furthermore, we see good results in strength training, balance training, agility. Most of the equipment out there there's a lot of great equipment out there, but it's very poorly used in most cases and greatly understood because most trainers, athletic performance trainers, understanding of the fundamental sciences behind it is weak, and therefore they tend to follow what everyone else does, watching videos on YouTube, looking at pictures, reading magazine books, but whereas they should really be studying physics books, biomechanics books, and exercise physiology books, rereading them day after day, year after year, and that will give the person a better understanding of what to choose, what exercise they need to choose to make an exercise work for a very specific person, based upon not only their blood labs, blood pressure, their body fat, but also their posture and their gait and many other variables that you need to take into account to really conduct the highest level exercise program for an individual athlete or as a team. The cons, which I've already mentioned some, as I mentioned, is complicated. Many of the advanced physiology concepts as it applies to purely improving the overall ability of the main aforementioned energy systems is varied but not great across the board at the pro or college level. This gets back to periodization. If you understand that, it's in order to understand really how to train a good athlete well, you have to understand the idea of periodization from a micro and macro perspective. And typically that's used pretty good on a pro and college level when it comes to weightlifting and energy systems, but very poorly understood in terms of biomechanics at the college or pro level. Thus, the entire system of periodization should be revamped to include biomechanical periodization, not just energy system and general injury and rest periodization. That's really how the chart is set up now. And that's what most people understand, because we're really ruled by the American College of Sports Medicine, which really doesn't rely heavily on biomechanics. And ACE and NATA and APTA really lean on this organization for a lot of their stuff, which again doesn't do a lot of biomechanics stuff. The concepts of super detailed postural and gait analysis is really, again, poorly understood at the college and pro levels. And this really, just like in the occupational health area, negatively affects the evaluation process. If you can't evaluate properly, good luck on putting together a program that is really scientifically valid, not just from the scientific method, but borrowing from multiple tests to make sure that each of those things that you're doing makes sense, if that makes sense. The negative effects of the evaluation process of not doing a correct one has devastating effects on the exercise prescription at every level, whether it be rehab, energy systems, injury, strength, endurance, agility, balance, skill performance, etc. Many of the exercises that are used today are still stuck in the powerlifting and bodybuilding models. Both models contain useful exercises, but most coaches, trainers don't know how to effectively use them. This is very easily demonstrated in a lot of different ways. Give me a minute with any coach that's training an athlete in any pro training room in the country, and I'll have you a believer within minutes of what they're doing. If you have a fundamental understanding of biomechanics and some rudimentary exercise physiology concepts that are rooted in DNA networks and traditional exercise phys. Much of the training today focuses on asymmetrically loaded balancing exercises, a la Paul Chek and other guys. Many of the exercises are really great, but they're really advanced. Because you put a person in an asymmetrical environment doesn't necessarily mean their body will adapt and become a bilateral loading machine again, where it's symmetrically balanced. It doesn't work that way. But a lot of these exercises are really loosely used. They just throw them out, and there's really no rhyme or reason or prescription to them at any level. Many athletes really need to start in a stabilized position where their gravitational muscles, the muscles that are engaged during gravity or in standing or running, type 1 slow twitch tonic muscles, are really turned off initially, not the whole time, but when you start working with an athlete, this is usually where you start. And the exercises are just as tough and brutal and as the person would be standing up doing other things, because a lot of these muscles don't know how to turn off, and therefore you have to work very hard to turn them off. Therefore the workout becomes very complicated and tough. Dynamic muscles, type 2 fast twitch phasic muscles, need to be turned on, and bilateral engagement of the neuromuscular system, getting away from the unilateral in the beginning and working towards bilateral exercises and bilateral engagement, and retraining of not only the phasic muscles but also the tonic muscles, and eventually using them symmetrically and together. Whereas in the beginning we have very imbalanced programs where typically the gravitational muscles are typically deactivated with every joint position in the correct position and an engagement of the phasic muscles. But eventually these muscles tend to balance out. The muscle spindles, the Golgi tendons tend to balance out, and we can start working towards more gravitational exercises and even towards one-legged squats on a Swiss ball that require a lot of balance. And there's a lot to those types of exercises, but there has to be a very specific order and a time for an exercise like that, and that's what I like to call progressive biomechanical periodization. I personally use a combination of kind of Navy SEAL exercises. This is superficial. This is what most people would identify with. It's not necessarily what I use, but what most people would identify with. And an equine jumping course to train my athletes. It is way far more superior way of training athletes compared to relying on parachutes and sleds and Bosu balls and balance boards and all kinds of balance equipment, and really an overuse of the weights. These are complicated concepts that have to be explained and understood in person or reading a physiology book or biomechanics book in great depth to really understand this. And sometimes seeing is believing. It's one of those things. Sometimes you got to see it to understand it, and let it soak in for a year to where you're able to really practice it. And that's why I focus so much on education. I don't think it's difficult to be a really good practitioner unless you're actually an educator, because you're forced to constantly use the information with professionals on a really deep level. The focus of weights in my programs, I love weights, powerlifting, I love all kinds of weightlifting, but there's a time and place for it. And the focus on weights in my programs, even at the highest levels, would be quote-unquote more of a rehab. It's to keep the joints solid, it's to keep the ligaments strong, and to keep the tendons strong in a balanced, functional way. The work on the fitness course is far more practical and transferable to sports. And the fitness course constantly elicits the myototic reflex plyometrics, which places far more force on the body. You produce twice as much strength in doing plyometrics exercises out on the fitness course than you ever would in the weight room. Therefore, your propensity to build muscle mass and strength and use of motor units is much higher doing plyometrics types of exercises using specific tools that I use on my fitness course than doing weights. So if you're trashing your body out on the fitness course and doing all these jumps and crawling and rolling and balancing and unusual stuff like that, the body has gotten its strength workout and far more transferable to what you're actually doing on the sports field, and customizable too based upon the sport, than using weights by themselves. But you sit down in front of a professional strength and conditioning coach, and these concepts are actually relatively within an hour. You'll have any strength and conditioning coach convinced of their validity, because we're talking about fundamental science and things that we can actually calculate and measure, and that have already been successfully done and proven on my side. Nutrition is another area that is very poorly misunderstood, and that's a whole other 100-hour course in itself. Again, most practitioners don't understand the underlying benefits of or understanding how nutrition actually works. Oxidation, reduction, DNA, its effect on the body, really what humans should be eating, motility in the stomach. There are so many concepts that are deep and require great research and clinical research to really start to understand this stuff, and a deep understanding of exercise physiology and nutrition to really explain how their nutrition program works. So if you can't really explain the underlying physiology or how it works, it's difficult to sell this program and to really make sense of it. So I think if a lot of people that are doing nutrition on the athletic side or with clients, they're doing a lot of interesting things out there, and much of it is not scientifically valid in my books. And there is a lot of scientific valid stuff out there that is useful and that athletes should use to build their training programs on. Nutrition is a massive part of athletic performance, and you have to have a massive understanding of physiology and how joints repair and how tendons and muscles repair, how growth hormone, testosterone works, in order to really know what you need to apply. And we're not just talking about basic macro and micronutrition. It goes way beyond that. We get deep into DNA and the environment and top nutraceutical companies and foods that are out there. So, and they even borrow from Eastern medicine as well. This really gets down to the study of energy, pure energy systems, whether in the Western society we're using thermodynamics, which is the study of energy, or we're studying energetic medicine in China and how they view energy, where they're using acupuncture for anesthesiology in their country. They have a much better understanding, I think, of whole body medicine for the most part compared to Western medicine, and seeing a lot of things that they do on that side. So nutrition is important. Current methods in personal training. This is a lot of crossover from what we've already talked about, but typically most trainers are not really well trained, as we'll talk about in a second. So what we do see is an effective use of things they've seen work with other athletes, and so more or less a lot of copying going on. I mean, we all copy, and what we are all copying from somebody, our techniques, but the problem is that it's one thing to copy it, but it's also another thing to be able to apply an exercise and actually understand why you're applying it, and to apply it to a very specific problem in the person's body, and to be able to evaluate that. And so evaluation becomes an issue. So most exercise programs are mildly, not moderately, mildly effective exercise programs that are not founded on scientific method. Fair results, not great results, can be seen in the energetic system work, doing cardio work and sprint work and whatever the trainer's doing with their client. And we see decent results in strength training, balance training, agility. So, we take the Jack LaLanne idea, a guy that really doesn't understand physiology, but he could motivate a crowd. He could motivate someone to eat low calories and motivate them to eat generally well, but really didn't understand a lot of that stuff, except that you just needed to be organic and you need to keep moving. But most trainers not having a really deep understanding of how that stuff works, and for a lot of the stuff to really work and to really be able to push it through and to sell it to a big company or top medical professionals, you have to understand it, unless you write a book that's it's a general book that really has no scientific validation, but is another gimmick that people buy into. So it's good to have that understanding and knowledge. And so I find that most trainers have a lack of fundamental education in kinesiology. Literally, most of them have not gone through a full course in kinesiology, 2 or 3 physiology classes, 2 or 3 biomechanics classes, physiology labs. They don't have the practical experience and rely upon reading one book and taking a test and becoming a personal trainer. So education problems there. So, but for the most part, I'm happy that personal trainers are out there and they're doing good. They're getting people to move, which is probably the most important thing. Biomechanics is typically the most misunderstood of the sciences at every level. It's difficult for most trainers to explain their evaluation prescription practices as it is at the top level, PhDs and master's level physical therapists, ATs and OTs. In fact, the ACM, the organization that most training and college organizations use, pay little attention to biomechanics, posture, gait, function of the body's proprioceptors. These healthcare professionals become reliant on technique and forget how to engineer and design a program based upon any given situation, as I've mentioned before. So, I mean, really, how can you design a program if you can't pass an entry-level anatomy or biomechanics test? Why do these professionals experience some level of success? The answer is, as I had said before, any kind of exercise can show positive results regardless of its validity. Any professional can walk a client. Most health maladies could probably be solved by walking at probably a 40 to 60% VO2 max, 90 minutes per day, 5 days a week. Back pain, knee pain, obesity, diabetes, cancer, depression, and more could probably be solved or greatly reduced by doing that. But what percentage of people really do that in our country? Less than 1%. So, and I would say that any healthcare professional can at least at minimum do this, and we're not even talking about stretch programs and weight training programs and classes and athletic performance programs. We're talking about simply just walking someone. That alone, probably the simplest thing to do. Anybody can do, any trainer can do, and probably have phenomenal results with the client. Steps in designing an exercise program. This is so therefore these are my very general recommendations on using my techniques in designing an exercise program. Obviously, there's proprietary stuff here, so I'm missing a lot of stuff, but gives you enough of a bite of it to get you interested and to see what we're actually doing. This is ideal situation for athletes and programs you'd want to design. A complete blood lab analysis, which I do for my clients, is done. Pull a lot of different information from allergies to fats to triglycerides to hormone levels to see where a person's at. Difficult to design a nutrition program, an exercise program, if you don't know how the body's actually working internally. You can look at the biomechanics, that's huge, but you got to know what the blood's doing on the inside. Complete medical history review, certainly look at MRIs, X-rays, surgery reports, etc. is essential. There are problems there, as there is with everything, but any information that you can get on a client, I think, is important to help create a legal, valid program that's effective. And I think you always want to try and collect data and to prove that your program is working not only for the client, the organization, but also for the industry. Nutrition analysis, some sort of basic intake, and prescription for the client is essential. Even getting into food delivery programs, things like that. All this is great and a wonderful moneymaker, but also essential for getting the client healthy and performing at their most effective levels. Body fat analysis, circumference measurements, height, weight, blood pressure, sub-anaerobic respiratory question testing via ergometer, lactate threshold, VO2 max testing on ergometer, functional strength analysis, videotaped, of course, gait analysis videotaped, ideally using infrared cameras and force platforms, but very expensive. But in an ideal situation, that's what you want. Postural analysis, pictures and videotape, of course, balance testing, reaction time testing, etc. You need to collect all the data. You need to be able to look at it, just like you would look at game video. You need to analyze it. You need to focus on it. You need to blow it up. You need to study every single movement, figure out what's going on with the athlete. But really, it doesn't take a lot this much. But it makes it a lot more valid and easier to see what's happening with the athlete and what it is that you need to fix. This takes it to a whole nother level. And then again, this is for an ideal situation. I can have a client in front of me and just take a look at him for probably less than 30 seconds and build their whole training program for 6 months for the top elite athlete. It would be pretty accurate, but it's certainly good to have a lot more information than just that. Detail analysis of game video of player, of course, so whatever the athlete is doing in their sport, whatever position they have, you certainly need to analyze that to see what their weaknesses and strengths are in that, and know how you could address that in their general exercise program to help them perform better on the field. Data analysis is the next part of designing an exercise program. You need to review all the data. Once you've collected it, you got to review it, and that can take some time in an ideal scenario. I personally like to do voiceovers structural and form drawings over postural gait, functional strength and sports position video. So you'll see a lot of line drawings, a lot of voiceovers, and then sending this back to the client and then saving this as kind of my review or analysis of what happened and what I'm seeing with the client at the time. It's nice to write down notes, but what we're talking about here is a much more effective way of collecting and remembering data and supporting your data and showing this video and this information back to your clients and other medical professionals in the future to help support your program and to prove it. Review all data collected from all the medical team staff, whatever program you're putting together, whether you've got PTs, ATs, OTs, personal trainers, chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists. There needs to be a collective database where the medical staff can easily review all this information and watch it. And as I aforementioned, from a exercise physical therapist side, athletic trainer, strength and conditioning coach, the aforementioned analysis, the postural video and the gait video and the voiceovers and the sports position video, that is excellent information to have and for everyone to review and to share, as is information coming from a massage therapist or a chiropractor or a medical doctor on their respective areas and what they have found. I think is very, very helpful and should be done to help create the exercise program. Exercise prescription itself. Exercise program is designed completely based upon the data collected from the analysis for each athlete. The goal is to ensure that all 10 systems of the body and DNA are functioning, being expressed at their full genetic potential. All systems that are addressed in the body go through a progressive periodization process to minimize mitosis, oxidative stress, joint damage, tendon strain, and ligament strain to maximize an athlete's performance and minimizing the chances of injury. Heavy emphasis is placed on correcting motor cortex, neuromuscular system imbalances. Many of these evaluation and prescription techniques are missing out of strength and conditioning programs. Again, give me any strength and conditioning program, I'll break it down and tear it apart for you in just a few minutes and tell you how you can improve it. Step 1 in exercise prescription is flexibility, range of motion / postural gait analysis correction. This is one big gray area. I mentioned 3 different things here, but they're all really the same in my world. When you say flexibility, work for an athlete, it really means strength and conditioning, it means posture gait, it's all the same, but there's really no one generally accepted term that everyone accepts and uses or would understand on a professional or a layman level. First, in creating exercise, whatever it is, powerlifting, stretching, strengthening, jumping, whatever it might be, throwing a football, an exercise position is designed to neutralize all postural landmarks, neuromuscular misalignments, and asymmetrical load bearing. Second, an exercise is created to correct imbalances between hypertonic muscles and dormant neuropathways and phasic muscles. Third, time is not a variable here. Exercises are done until every misalignment is corrected every time. That is an interesting thing to see. And hard to understand what it does until you actually see it. It will blow your mind. Progression is the key here. It takes about 2 weeks to see massive changes in the activation of phasic muscles and decrease in hypertonicity of muscle spindles and tonic muscles. It takes a full 6 weeks to see a complete realignment with a dedicated athlete. You don't want athletes training hard and compromised asymmetrical postures. Every athlete should receive their own corrective postural gait program forever. Step 2, full body conditioning program. A program that accounts for all 10 systems, strengths, and weaknesses. A progressive periodized program is designed to maximally train endurance, functional strength, range of motion, motor unit engagement, strengthening dormant phasic muscles and lengthening hypertonic muscle spindles, etc. Agility, balance, speed, and much more. A variety of new traditional exercises are used here at different times as the athlete's posture, gait, functional strength, balance, speed, agility, and anaerobic ability evolve. Typically, college athletes have more neuromuscular college and pro athletes have more neuromuscular problems, therefore take longer to evolve. Again, as you'll see here shortly, this full body conditioning program is something that includes a lot of non-traditional movements and gets away from more of the typical strength training, early Nebraska weightlifting programs, early San Diego State, San Diego Chargers strength conditioning programs, early powerlifting programs, and gets towards more of an old school but more effective way for training. And that is the elite exercise course, full body conditioning course that is one tool in training an athlete. And basically what you'll see on here is it kind of looks like a Navy SEAL course combined with an equestrian course, and that's actually where it was adapted from, exactly. These are horse jumps, really, and we've adapted them. And a variety of jumping, crawling, rolling, push-up, jumping things exercises are done here that are far more effective and produce far more results on many levels for strength, conditioning, aerobic, anaerobic, reflexes, motor unit recruitment, overall improvement. In the combination of using weights and flexibility work and other traditional new techniques, this becomes the core for generally conditioning your athlete, whether they're trying to gain muscle mass, rehab injuries, or just improve their body on every level. This is a staple, a foundation, and one that should be at every NFL training center, Olympic training course, college and high school in America, to prevent injuries, but also to improve athletic performance overall. But again, only one tool, but a primary one that's really missed. Now we're getting back to early European Olympic teams' success, and why their programs are so successful is because they did a lot of this kind of stuff combined with their weightlifting. Speed or endurance training, exercise prescription, step 3. Progressive periodized training is implemented here where all systems can adapt to express genetic potential and minimize injury. Speed athletes, ATP, CP, and anaerobic glycolysis are the energetic systems we're talking about here. They have to be sports and position-specific exercises that are created to maximize motor unit recruitment, force production, muscle hypertrophy, anaerobic enzyme activity, and much more. Aerobic athletes, our focus is on building mitochondria, folks, and mitochondrial enzymes. That's what it's all about, and we need to stress the body to do that, and it's done in some very specific ways. We're talking about aerobic lipolysis and anaerobic glycolysis. Sport-specific exercises are created to maximize increase in mitochondrial density and number of mitochondrial enzymes, intramuscular triglyceride storage, and usage. That's your gold there. Weight training, progressive periodized training, is implemented here where all the systems can adapt to express genetic potential and minimize injury. Most importantly, resistance training is an essential component for preventing injury. Secondly, weight training is effective for improving motor recruitment, muscle hypertrophy, anaerobic enzyme activity, etc. Weight training is second to full body conditioning that incorporates plyometric, full body exercises that activate motor units and muscle fibers than weight training does due to the myototic reflex, plyometrics. If you understand that. Furthermore, full body conditioning simulates the athlete's actual potential and position. Full body conditioning can be done in 2 hours per day, but must incorporate postural exercises on the front and back end of the program due to the high force and ballistic nature of plyometric exercises compared to traditional agility and weight training movements. Recover and repair. Step 5. Flexibility, range of motion, postural correction is an intricate part of the recovery process. A typical Division I or pro athlete should be conditioned between 6 to 8 hours a day. This is much like a race car. Race cars go through a lot, and they typically need a lot of maintenance, tons of maintenance. And usually there's a ratio that I use for that, which is proprietary, but it does take a certain amount of time to recover a body and to get it where it needs to be to work and do the exact same thing day after day after day without incurring injury. This can only be effective if the athlete is performing his or her postural correction exercises before and after the workouts. And of course you get into nutrition and sleep and massage as important components for recovery. But recovery is built into the progressive periodization program. It takes time to build this up. Sometimes it can take months to get a person where they need to be to where they're on more of a maintenance program and they can really quote-unquote beat up their body and recover fast. But if you're bringing an athlete in that hasn't gone through this stuff before, it can take weeks if not months to get them to where they need to exactly be before you're really able to fire on all 12 cylinders. This is a typical training day for a conditioning camp. Pretty close to ideal, 6 to 8 hours a day type of thing. Typical training day if I'm putting on a camp or something long term. Of course, we're periodizing this, so their break periods is 4 to 5 days a week, 6 to 8 hours per day. And it's a program that would fit in the periodization model, so you're working out 4 weeks, 5 weeks max before taking a really good solid break, and then changing the intensities and the reps and all those fun things along the way, so it does fit in the periodization model. So here's what it would look like, ideally. And will change based upon the athletes and can be created in a customized way for an individual athlete or a group of athletes that participate in a specific sport or even a position. You want to warm up the body somehow. The safest way to do that initially is a hot shower, hot tub, or something to preheat the body to reduce whole body viscosity. About 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you start looking at dehydration and demineralization. Functional jog, created by a famous UCLA track coach. This just warms the body up and puts it in the correct gait. Weigh-ins, body fat's always nice to get, a couple minutes. Flexibility, muscle activation, 30 to 60 minutes. Postural exercise is what we're talking about here, and correct activation movements to make sure the body's primary gait activators, initiators, thoracic extensors, things like that are working properly. Warming up the body in succession progressively so that the body is warmed up in such a way that all the muscles are properly activated. Full body fitness program, which we've talked about, will go as much as 2 hours, combining a lot of different exercises, not just the elite course that we talked about, but using other exercises, whether running, crawling stairs, pushing cars, no matter what we're doing, ladders, cones, suicides, no matter what it might be, throwing around medicine balls, that's all included as part of that fitness program. Then we get into our postural exercise, again, flexibility, wanting more to do more stretching work after a high activation, but usually and initially we'll find that we're doing a lot of postural correction stuff individually for athletes in the first phases of their career and doing this kind of stuff. And then of course we have breakfast. After that, there's certainly things that you want to do in the flexibility area nutritionally so the body repairs before we get into breakfast. Then we get into modalities, potentially ice, heat, massage, etc. After these workouts. Those are all possibilities and very positive things. Chiropractic adjustments, acupuncture, whatever it might be. Then there's an afternoon training session. So the athlete's taking a nap probably for 2 or 3 hours because they're wiped. They get into flexibility and muscle activation techniques again for 30 to 60 minutes. This is their postural gait correction stuff. Then we hit weights, agility, and speed work for 90 minutes, and may not be speed work. It really depends upon the athlete and what we're trying to do. This would be more for probably an anaerobic type of athlete where they're doing movements that range anywhere from just a few seconds up to about 60 seconds in length. That's what this training program would look like, but certainly would be adapted for more of an aerobic athlete. Position and sport-specific technique drills, whatever the athlete's doing, we either bring in professionals to help out in this area, or we assist or do these particular drills ourselves if our professionals are trained in those areas.